Have you ever wondered why, the moment you step back, he suddenly reaches forward, why silence seems to echo louder than your words ever did? It is one of the oldest dances in the human story, the pull and the retreat, the hunter and the mirror, the self and its shadow. And though it plays out in messages left unseen and glances that linger too long, what moves beneath it is older than both of you, something that belongs to the psyche itself. When you pull away, his shadow wakes up. There is a moment, quiet but seismic, when a woman remembers her worth. It is not an act of pride, but of equilibrium. She begins to sense that her giving has tilted too far outward. That her warmth has become an offering without altar. And so she steps back, softly, maybe without meaning to. She simply breathes in the space she had once abandoned for connection. To the surface mind of the man, it looks like withdrawal. But to the deeper psyche, it feels like loss, like rejection, like darkness moving over the familiar light. In the space where she once stood, his shadow stirs. The shadow, Carl Jung wrote, is everything the ego refuses to see. It carries not only shame and anger, but also longing, dependency, pride, the things we repress because they do not fit the image we want to be true. Every man has one, every woman too. But when equilibrium shifts, the rejected parts of one psyche reach toward the other like roots seeking water. In the beginning, he may have adored her because she reflected the light of his ideal self. She seemed endless, a mirror of tenderness and challenge, the sun that drew forth all his sleeping strengths. He saw in her the courage he forgot he once had. He felt alive in her brightness. And for a time, both egos agreed on the fantasy that this light could stay forever fixed. But when she steps back, when her voice grows calm, when her attention unsolders itself from his validation, the mirror cracks. He no longer sees his perfection there. He sees the void where applause once lived. And that void begins to whisper the things he refused to hear: you are not complete. You are afraid of being left. You are afraid of not being enough. The shadow wakes. To the outer eye, it looks like sudden obsession. Messages come flooding in. He replays conversations. He remembers every aromatic thread of her perfume and every silence between their words. He feels anger, desire, and fear tangled like vines. But beneath that manic reaching is a simpler truth: his psyche has been forced into the mirror of its own emptiness. What she withdrew was not approval, she withdrew the anesthesia. When you pull away, you do not punish him, you simply reflect him. And reflection is light too bright for those who have not yet looked within. Psychologically, something ancient is triggered in the masculine when the feminine reclaims her center. Throughout myth and longing, the masculine principle moves toward order, conquest, and clarity, while the feminine principle embodies mystery, depth, and the cycles of transformation. When mystery recedes, the unintegrated masculine feels lost, confronted by his own unmanaged chaos. The Stoics would say, what disturbs him is not the loss itself, but his perception of it, his belief that without her gaze, he disappears. And still, he runs toward her shadow trying to find his own outline again. In this story, which plays out in the everyday heartbreaks of text messages and eye contact, there is something both cosmic and tender. Every woman who has learned to step back from overgiving becomes, in that instant, both teacher and mirror. Not through arrogance, but through necessity. Because no one heals while drowning in someone else's need. When she stops rescuing, she allows the other to rise, or to face the abyss they've built under themselves. It can be painful to witness. Yet in that pain, growth begins for both. The masculine psyche, unexamined, depends on external reflection to know itself. The feminine psyche, overextended, depends on contribution to feel worthy. So when she reclaims herself, both are forced toward wholeness. Her liberation invites his confrontation. In Jungian language, this dance is individuation disguised as heartbreak. It's the psyche's way of saying, integration is overdue. You, the one who has pulled away, are not being cruel. You are giving gravity back to both. He may call it confusion. He may call it mixed signals. He may reach and retreat, trying to find who he was when your attention bathed him. But what he really wants is to recover the self he lost inside projection. Projection, that hidden trick of the mind, is the first act of every romance. One soul paints its unlived qualities across another and bows before the masterpiece, not knowing it was their own colors all along. When you withdraw, you erase the canvas just enough for him to see what's missing. This is why obsession blooms like a sudden dark rose. It is not love, not fully, it is the shadow's hunger for reunion with the self. Watch long enough, and you'll see it everywhere, in the stories, the myths, the quiet sighs behind ordinary breakups. Narcissus does not drown in love of another, he drowns in his own reflection. And yet, his reflection was the key to awakening, if only he could have looked through it rather than into it. When you pull away, you offer him that chance, to look through the reflection toward himself. But most cannot. Not at first. They rage against the disappearing image, mistaking it for betrayal. He was never worshipping you. He was worshipping the parts of himself your presence allowed him to see. And in that realization, something merciful unfolds for you, too. Because the moment you see his obsession for what it is, a mirror reaction, a psychic panic, you stop personalizing his turbulence. You understand he's not fighting for you, he's fighting for contact with his own lost power. That understanding is freedom disguised as solitude. It softens resentment and dissolves pity. It replaces the question, why doesn't he value me? With what part of myself did I think he held for me? And that question, tender, raw, is where your own shadow begins to wake. Because projection flows both ways. Perhaps you were drawn to his confidence, the steady tone of his conviction. Perhaps what glowed in him was the very self-assurance you feared you lacked. You poured your light into him so some of it might reflect back and prove you worthy. That was never wrong, only human. But as your awareness grows, the archetype shifts. The maiden becomes the queen. The dependent lover becomes the sovereign woman. She no longer seeks validation by being seen, she seeks reflection by being whole. In the language of the psyche, this turning inward is not isolation, it is integration. You do not become cold, you become clear. Still, clarity can be mistaken for distance by those addicted to ambiguity. When you no longer chase, the other senses an energetic silence. And silence, that holy space, terrifies the part of him that equates noise with love. He will try to fill it, messages, promises, anger, nostalgia. But nothing he does will bridge the gap because the gap is within him. It is the distance between his ego and his shadow. Every human must walk that distance alone. Neither pleading nor clinging can shorten the road. In the ancient myths, when the goddess descended into the underworld, Inanna, Persephone, Isis, she did not go as a victim. She went as one willing to confront the unconscious, to meet what was buried, to bring it to light. When you step back into yourself, you too descend. You face your fear of being forgotten, your craving to be chosen, your ache to prove value. You sit with them until their edges soften, until you realize these were never punishments but unhealed parts asking for your own devotion. And as you attend to them, you grow luminous. Even the shadow begins to feel warmth again, but this time it's your own. That's why grounded women glow differently, not the dazzle of performance, but the quiet radiance of integration. The kind that says, without words, I am whole, even when unseen. From the outside, the man still tries to decode this. He may feel magnetized once more, inexplicably drawn back to what he cannot control. His subconscious senses transformation, and transformation is the most compelling scent on earth. But now, he meets a woman who no longer plays the reflective game. She listens, but not to validate. She feels, but not to merge. She stands, but not to be chosen. She chooses herself. That equilibrium is intoxicating, not because it flatters him, but because it whispers of freedom. If he has courage, he follows that whisper inward, to meet the parts of himself he once outsourced to her. If he does not, he clings to the image, and the obsession renews until life itself teaches what his heart would not. There is a kind of beauty, tragic and sacred, in these cycles of projection and withdrawal. Because every heartbreak is a spiritual initiation written in human emotion. You think you are learning about love, but you are actually learning about truth, the truth of who you are without applause, without reflection. As the Stoic philosophers taught, you cannot lose what was never yours, and you cannot own what was never free. The enlightened heart understands that love is not possession, but presence. And presence demands wholeness, not need. So when obsession flames, when his shadow wakes, you do not run back to soothe it. You stand steady, letting the fire burn what was false. You watch with compassion, but not with sacrifice. Some say detachment is cold. But real detachment is warm, it glows from the center of self-respect. It does not reject life, it simply refuses to bargain for it. To detach is to see clearly without closing the heart. It means you can witness another's turmoil without joining their storm. It means you can love without losing form. This form, your sovereignty, is your sacred temple. Without it, love becomes theater, with it, love becomes truth. When your boundaries root deep enough, even the fiercest winds of longing cannot uproot you. You realize that those who are meant to stand beside you will not require your vanishing to shine. They will bring their own light, and meet yours in sovereignty. And as for his shadow, the restless entity that woke when you pulled away, it will, eventually, quiet. All shadows do when faced enough times by consciousness. Whether through loss or awakening, he will one day see that what he chased was never you, but the faint reflection of himself flickering in your eyes. And that recognition, though late, is the beginning of his real growth. Your distance was not rejection. It was mercy disguised as silence. Because in withdrawal, you offered a mirror, in detachment, you offered truth, in self-return, you offered the one invitation that matters: know yourself. Time passes. You move differently now, less to impress, more to express. You notice that peace feels strange at first, almost empty. But slowly, that emptiness becomes spaciousness, and spaciousness becomes strength. You realize that love, at its most mature form, is not anxiety dressed as devotion. It is freedom paired with trust, two selves facing the world, not consuming each other to survive it. Every time you breathe calmly through longing, every time you choose stillness over pleading, the psyche rewrites the script of love. What once was a story of grasping becomes one of grace. And grace is irresistible, not because it seduces, but because it liberates. The world may still tell stories of chase and conquest. It may package attachment as romance and dependence as loyalty. But those who have walked through obsession know better. They have tasted awakening inside heartbreak, that bitter medicine that dissolves illusion faster than any prayer. When you pull away, and his shadow wakes, 1,000 archetypes stir. The wounded hero meeting his abyss. The forgotten goddess returning from exile. The two halves of a soul, finally aware they are not halves at all, but wholes who once traded mirrors. This is not a tragedy, it's a metamorphosis. And if the story ends, let it end in clarity, not bitterness. Because whatever he was meant to learn, he will learn. Whatever you were meant to remember, you already have. Love does not disappear when you choose yourself. It refines itself. It sheds the fever of projection and becomes something quieter, the reverence that two integrated beings can share without losing their shape. You no longer wait for the message, the apology, the validation. Because something inside you, older than words, older than fear, now whispers the only sentence worth hearing: you are already enough. And that whisper is so steady, so radiant, that even the shadows bow. So if ever again you notice someone's need flare up the moment you step back, remember, the human heart is a mirror of the unseen self. You did not create the emptiness they feel, you only stopped filling it for them. And that understanding, that compassion without surrender, is the quiet revolution of self-worth. When you pull away, yes, his shadow wakes up. But in that same moment, your light rises. And between the two, a new truth dawns. Love is not what binds. Love is what frees.